welcome to the latest panel. This one, the dark side, is gambling ruining esports. I've got to check it's on my phone. My name's Scott Longley. I'm from Clear Concise Media. Also help write the Earnings and More newsletter, which I encourage everyone to sign up to. With me is a panel of distinguished guests. We have Conleth Byrne, Product Director from SIS, Justin Dellario, Managing Director, Esports at Entain, Marek Suchar, Managing Director of OdinGG, and Thomas Rosander, Real Luck Group CEO and Director. Right, is gambling ruining esports? Marek, you get the worst question of all, but that sounds like a dramatic introduction, and I realise that the organisers of these kind of events have to try and encourage people to come along and discuss these things as if that's a real thing. But is that a fair? I don't think that's a fair description, is it?
Yeah. Many thanks for the question, and many thanks for being here with us. I would probably transfer the question to: is gambling ruining the sports? Right? It's the same question pretty much. So as soon as you have the people playing, enjoying the game, watching, and essentially eventually betting, then this is the fair question pretty much fit everywhere. So unless if you are working in a regulated environment, if the players are protected, either when it comes to responsible gambling or underage betting or this kind of stuff, it doesn't matter whether we are speaking about sports, esports, whether we are speaking about casino games, it's pretty much all the time the same. As soon as these tools are in place, then this is not ruining the game at all.
Okay. And to get get the terminology right from the off, you would probably consider yourself to be an endemic esports betting brand. Would that be right?
Yeah, from the point of introduction, OdinGG is B2B sports odds feeding management and iframe provider. So we are right now #1 choice, I would say, for the operators thinking about esports on the regulated markets. So we are endemic for sure. Esports is our expertise. This is where we are growing. This is what we support our clients with. So when it comes to esports, this is definitely our area of expertise. So should we be discussing traditional sports, I will not be that knowledgeable. Hopefully in esports, I will be.
No. And Thomas, would you say you are an endemic esports brand?
We have been seen as one, but we are trying not to be, I would say.
Uh-huh. In what sense? You're coming from the esports milieu, and you're moving towards traditional sports betting. Would that be?
We do traditional sports, and we do casino as well. But to answer your question, I think what has to happen now is that esports, and it will happen independently of what everybody thinks and so on, but we can see it clearly that esports will become mainstream eventually. It's not going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen next year either, probably, but it will happen, and it will happen because video gaming it's already the default entertainment in the world. Yeah. It's bigger than movie industry and sport industry together already. And they were saying downstairs earlier today that they were doing predictions, and this is a really easy prediction. There is a reason why I don't know, Apple and Netflix and Amazon, everybody's going into video gaming. It's because it is basically taking over the world in a way that the world has never seen before. There's never been a default entertainment that has encompassed basically the entire world on this scale. And that's why I can with confidence say that esports will grow and become mainstream.
Yeah, so if esports is on its way, or some would say is already at the point of being mainstream, esports as a concept, and it's something that everybody is well aware of. Certainly, and Conleth here, proudly admitted just before he doesn't play esports games himself, but of course his children do. So it's a generational thing, that there's generations coming up which are playing esports or playing computer gaming in a way that generations before didn't. But that generational change, is that also going to translate into esports betting, which is, I suppose, is the point of this panel, in that you obviously have generations coming up playing esports, making it one of the most popular pastimes, and some of the games are the biggest games in the world. People have heard of those games even if they've never played them. But is that generation itself, what are we as esports betting providers or operators, are we trying to attract people that generation of people to betting? I suppose we can go to Justin at the end there, because obviously Entain has made its own very public move in terms of esports by buying Unicorn. You're heading that up. Sorry, I should have asked you before, but do you come from Unicorn or are you from Entain?
So I was hired by Entain at about the same time that we were acquiring Unicorn. Prior to Entain, I worked at Twitch for the last several years, and prior to that, I was leading marketing at Razer, a computer product manufacturer, also really endemic to esports. And then as it relates to esports, I'm an esports industry veteran. I've been participating in building esports since around 2005. I'm brand new to betting and wagering. I've only been involved in this space for the last year.
Okay, so that's interesting. So you're coming from the esports space, but you're working with a company which is very much more involved in betting than the other brands here, which are relatively new to betting. What is your job? How do you see your job in terms of trying to persuade Entain about esports?
Sure. Well, leading esports at Entain really has a couple different key projects to it right now. First and foremost is relaunching the Unicorn brand, which we acquired last year, and we're close to relaunching now. Unicorn is definitely our very endemic esports and video games first brand. Part of taking it offline when we acquired it was bringing it up to Entain's compliance standards, responsible gaming standards, and ensuring that everywhere we'd operate, just like Entain, we'd be locally compliant. But the Entain esports opportunity is larger than just one brand. Obviously, Entain operates the Buins, the Ladbrokes, Corals, et cetera, around the world. And similar to you would find on a Bet365 or a Betway, there's a significant opportunity to just offer an adjacent esports set of features and odds that some customers will cross over and partake in, that Entain hasn't really put a lot of focus into previously. So we're looking at those two angles right now. Launch the Unicorn brand, go back to finding success for that as a really endemic home of esports type brand, but then also make a more meaningful opportunity across the other labels at Entain.
Thomas, are you attracting a new audience to betting? Is that the truth, that you're attracting a younger demographic to betting generally, and then switching them depending on where you want to direct them, to slots or to traditional sports betting or to esports betting?
We have been or Luckbox has been super clear from the beginning that we are focused on the new generation. What I can see is that the products that we are building for the new generation, which is speaking to them in a different way, and it's much more faster, much engaging, and so on. There is nothing. So we're building these products because we want to speak to this generation. But what's happening now is that it's not just the new generation that is on TikTok. It's, I am on TikTok. They have fantastic algorithms, that really shows exactly what you want. And it's always that thing, with just one more. Mm-hmm. And whoever is going to succeed, not only with the new generation, it's an absolute must for the new generation, but even for the existing generation, or the older generation, we call it that, you have to adapt your products. And I think in sports betting, we've been so comfortable and lazy because we've been making the money anyway. But now the margins are tough, which everybody in the business knows. So I think that real innovation in the sports betting product space is key. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not only me either. We see it with basically every company is talking about micro betting and so on these days.
Yeah. If I can just add to that demographics, we have recently launched or made analysis with one of our partners, Tipsport in Czech Republic, and from them the demographics is basically the way that when it comes to new bettors with new bet slips, when it comes to traditional sports, all the new bettors are in age 33 plus. When it comes to esports, this is 25 years old in average. So you see a huge demographic change in terms of younger audience, and of course you do not want to go below 18 when it comes to betting. And at the same time, anything that is close to it is only MMA that sits at around 28 years old. At the same time, you have the data showing that when it comes to, for example, viewers, not necessarily bettors, but viewers of MLB in the US, this is the generation of 50 plus in terms of years. So there is definitely a huge change in terms of what is the audience for esports, versus what is the audience for traditional sports. And at the same time, many times we are given a question like, do you want to transit the traditional sports bettors to esports, or do you want to cultivate and bring the esports audience to betting? And of course, is the second, because you will not somehow make a soccer person understand Dota unless he spends thousands of hours actually playing the game. So this is what we are trying all, I guess, achieve, is actually to get the young audience, the esports fans, into the betting if they want to do so, if they are 18 years plus, if this is up to the discussion. But definitely we are not touching the sports scene unless we'll be speaking about e-simulators, and that is quite a different topic.
Because another brand that I know is in the market is Rivalry, which is Canadian listed, and they've made quite a big splash in terms of, at least they're open for business in Ontario, and they say, I think they've made exactly that point, Marek, that they're going for the esports audience, the endemic audience, and they're trying to attract them to the betting idea, and that's partly through esports betting and partly through traditional sports, but it's a completely new audience. But there are other brands in the space, notably I suppose Pinnacle and Betway, who are more clearly betting operators, and they're aiming from the other way. I guess they're aiming from the other way. Conleth, do you think? I mean, what plans have you got, and what are the strategies that you can see when it comes to the products you offer?
Sure. Thanks, Scott. There's quite a lot to unpack in that particular question. I think it depends on the product and the customer. I mean, ultimately, SIS have been producing content for betting operators for over 30 years, which is, obviously horse racing initially, greyhound racing, and then other lottery-style products. We've probably been doing esports content for about 3 years. But even within esports, and this is a debate we've had amongst people on this panel previously about what is it when we say esports, what do we talk about? We started with sports sims, which I think we'd probably all agree is not really esports. It's a skill-based complementary product for a major content that traditional bookmakers already use. And so we started with that, and obviously had a degree of success. But that content is much easier to start the conversation with traditional bookmakers because they're familiar with the content, the structure, the makeup, and they can see how it can complement what they're already offering. For me, it's more of a stepping stone to, well, how do we get them engaged with real esports, League of Legends, Dota 2, CS:GO. Just to pick up a point that Thomas made, it's hard to picture, I think, a little bit, but this is absolutely going to be mainstream in the way that football is mainstream today. And to make a statement that this will be bigger than football at some stage over the next 10 years, for argument's sake, sounds quite outlandish. But ultimately, the eyes on that particular type of content is so great that that's what's going to happen, because people who like to watch this kind of content or involved in it or play it, the engagement that you get from also having a bet, albeit within regulatory constraints and compliance, that's what will make it popular. That's what will make it mainstream. So I think Betway and Pinnacle you mentioned have probably led the way a little bit from the point of view of trying to embrace that side of esports. The opportunity for everybody, I think, on this panel is about how do we then transition that towards the really popular esports and make that mainstream front of house content in the same way football is.
Is there an issue around the actual products that you can supply in terms of latency issues and feeds and the rest of that? Is that something that you're overcoming as you go along?
Absolutely, there's a challenge in that, because many times if you watch Twitch, this is a delay stream. So as a provider of the odds feed, you definitely need to be on top of what is actually happening in real time. So there are definitely challenges, but because this is our bread and butter, we know where to look, where to find the official data, how to work with the tournament organizers, with the publishers who are actually getting to the data. So this is definitely a challenge. But at the same time, also just having the data and do not know what to do with the data is another challenge, because esports is quite different when it comes to traditional sports, because it constantly evolves. You have certain things that are called patches, so the game evolves pretty much every couple of months. So while in soccer probably you are fine with the model that was valid 10 years ago, in esports every 3 to 6 months you need to evolve the model because it will not work anymore.
And do you think traditional betting brands would understand that? Do you see what I mean? That's a very different proposition from their point of view. If the actual product that they're trying to get people to bet on changes or evolves over a short space of time, that's something that they're not countering that with football or rugby or tennis or any other major sport.
This is why in the last 3 to 4 years I would say that there were also a lot of challenges from operators to better comprehend esports, because many times they were in a situation where I have low traffic on esports because I do not communicate to esports audience, but at the same time I'm losing money at the esports. So why should I actually pay attention to it? And you need to get out of the vicious cycle, have the right product, and have right communication channels. What we are seeing with our clients like Ladbox or Betway, that are actually building that volume, building that handle, because otherwise you are stuck in a situation where this is somewhere close to darts in my portfolio when it comes to sportsbook. It is not making any money, so how should I invest? But at the same time, if you look at it from the perspective of bettor, how they should go to your sportsbook when you don't communicate to them and the product is basically not good at all. So this is some of the things that we are seeing on the market when we are working also with the traditional sportsbook. They do understand they should do something about it because of the audience, and they are starting with the right product and they continue with the right marketing around it.
And one thing I suppose, one of the big differences when it comes to esports versus traditional sports is obviously the role of a publisher. We haven't got that in traditional sports, we've got it in esports. Where do they sit in this ecosystem? Or how do they, I mean, effectively, what's their reaction to the idea of betting on esports? Is that something that they encourage? Now, games have loot boxes, and that's gambling, but it's just not official gambling. But if you've got publishers sitting there and talking about or seeing what's happening around esports and around esports betting, what are they likely to do? I mean, Thomas, what do you have an interaction with the publishers of esports on the games that you are on, the sports that you're betting on?
No, I don't. I used to work for a big publisher for electronic arts back in the day, and we already then tried to convince them to go into this because we could see what Riot was doing with League of Legends. I don't know if you know these names, but in video gaming there's one of the big bosses for EA is a guy called Frank Gibault, and he was an old school guy. Now he's actually CEO for Zynga. But the first time we were at Gamescom in Cologne, and his face when he came into the part of the whole fair, which was Riot's League of Legends live match going on, and people were standing up screaming. It's like you go into a derby in a big city, and it was indoors and it was absolutely crazy, and people dressed up for the occasion and so on. Then he realized that this was big, and we tried to make it then, but they are scared of the betting thing. But this was probably more than 10 years ago. I can tell you that they are much closer right now. We can see it, what's happening, and we have seen that Riot has now invested a lot in broadcasting their things themselves. And they don't say it loudly, but for sure they have betting as an income in one way or another as part of that.
It's built into their spreadsheets.
So can I just add to that, Scott? I mean, this is probably a question really for Justin, because his role with a monster of a company means that publishers are probably more inclined to talk to Justin than the rest of us, frankly. I mean, I've attempted and have got a relationship with some of the publishers. The reality, I've always been quite 20 seconds on this, is that they're probably, other revenue generators, still a particularly low percentage of the revenues they're generating. There is a little bit of fear around the betting element anyway. I think from our perspective, what will happen is that we will continue to grow and exponentially, and it'll become a size where they'll become much more interested at a particular trigger point, I would suspect. But I think Justin has probably got a little bit more direct conversations with some of these guys.
Yeah, I think the important thing to understand about game publishers and their participation in esports as an ecosystem is that, for instance, if Riot publishes the largest esport in the world, which is League of Legends, then that means that that is an IP wholly owned by them. The lookalike anecdote would be if somebody actually cleanly, purely owned the basketball, and then they were able to sit there and either license or charge NBA for every time that there was a game or broadcast or anything, and the NBA had to pay that publisher, but that doesn't typically exist in traditional sports. So in video games over the years, what we've seen is some different approaches by publishers to esports generally, and those have affected then what comes next. Some publishers have decided to participate in esports. Some have decided to not participate in esports. And then for those who have participated, they've done so either as purely a marketing effort that they understand drives retention and engagement around their game, so they're just happy for that to exist, or they've seen some success and momentum with their esports, so they've transitioned over time from a marketing activity to that of a business. And there's very few game publishers in the world who are looking at their own esports as a business. Those are the likes of Riot. You could say Valve to an extent, even though Valve actually uses third parties almost entirely to operate their esports for them. But they're definitely mindful of the fact that they have some of the biggest esports in the world. And it's those publishers who are thinking about esports as a business who then are looking at what the valuable revenue streams are to surround this investment for them with. And it's those publishers who have an interest in betting today. But a lot of game publishers today are either keeping betting close, but still an arm's distance because they just don't know how to enter it correctly without upsetting their community. Some of them are very willing to get involved. They're just waiting for the financial terms to match their own expectations, which aren't there yet. And then some are just trying to, they've at least signaled intent, but they just want to learn for now. So for example, with Unicorn, we don't just think about esports, we think about competitive gaming because we offer not only fixed odds betting, but also skill-based wagering around video games. And in order to support those two product types and then take care of what's essentially our shared customers with those game publishers, those products are only made better if the publishers are directly integrating with us. So we're consistently out talking to game publishers about ways that we could possibly integrate across our products so that, again, we could take care of that shared customer. And in some cases, the publisher is saying, okay, yeah, let's trial something. We're not going to co-market it. In fact, nobody should know we're trialing something with you, but we would love to see the data that comes back. So here's a trial that we're going to do with you. And then some publishers are saying, go ahead and run your product without my permission. We promise we won't cease and desist you, but we want the same thing. We want the data, and then we'll decide what to do from there. And some publishers are just saying, absolutely not right now. It's just, we're too worried about all of the moms of the children who play our game that would be extremely angered when they found out that there's anything betting swirling around our game. So that's kind of where the publishers are all sitting around this today. However, they do, for the most part, acknowledge there are a lot of their customers betting or wagering around their video game, and they do know at some point they need a piece of that. And if they don't get it, then they're either foolish or they need to figure out a way to completely shut it down. But if that was the case, they already would have done so. And there's a ton of black and gray market betting happening that they can't even figure out how to potentially affect. So they need to figure out a way through the door.
So that last point is really important, isn't it? Because when I speak to them, that element of they have to accept they can't actually control betting on some other products because it will happen whether they like it or not. The question is whether they can control it, regulate it. From a CIS perspective, we kind of offer that kind of buffer where we say we'll produce it and create it and we'll take the stick if you like, and they're just one step removed, but they have all the data that they require in order to make sure that they're keeping a handle on it. And that's quite, I think that's an attractive proposition, but they still need to see more revenue generation before they really get enthusiastic about it.
Marek, do you think is your company acting as a buffer between publishers and the potential audience here? Are you kind of acting like a gatekeeper?
Not yet. We hope to get to that position, I would say. But at the same time, as Justin mentioned, and Conleth actually second that, what is important to understand is that even before PASPA appeal, when there was an NHL match in Scandinavia, in Sweden, in Czech Republic, we were able to bet on that match, even though it was not legal in US. And in US, actually, this was where the content was produced. It is similar with publishers. If Riot decides that they will not support betting, anyway, those lines will be around there. They've been around for 7 and more years. So this betting will be happening. At the same time, as a betting industry, of course, what we are looking for is ideally to have the access to the fastest data. It doesn't need to be real-time data. It just needs to be the fastest in the comparison to everybody else. So there is not somebody with the inside information. So essentially, there is those frenemies relationship where their content will be out there anyway because they will not stop providing those leagues. They will not stop streaming on Twitch. So that content will be there. There will be the demand for that because there will be eyeballs. So essentially, there will be providers like us or somebody else providing those lines. There will be bookmakers interested in that content, bettors interested in betting on it. It's just to what extent we can coexist in the ecosystem in a way that many of the publishers, they are mostly looking at the integrity, as it was mentioned on Justin's side. So no underage are actually affected and other stuff. It's as with everything else. Unless there's a regulated market, there's already an usually unregulated market. So those discussions will continue to happen. And at the same time, a lot of changes we've seen after PASPA appeal. At the same time, we need to realize that when it comes to Riot, when it comes to Activision Blizzard, all of those companies, they are US-based, but at the same time, they are owned by Tencent, Chinese company. So there is by default some approach to the betting that we don't want to do that. But many of them are looking at it from more perspective of where we want to create the engagement for the community. Betting is part of the engagement. So to what extent we can be involved, but at the same time not involved too much that it can hurt our public appearance.
You mentioned integrity. I think that's a really important point, isn't it, with esports, is that in terms of the potential for the integrity of the game itself, there would appear there's already been a number of scandals, and it's involving all sorts of nefarious activities, shall we put it? Now, is esports particularly prone to, and I guess this is where they get the dark side thing from, really. Is it particularly prone to issues around integrity? Thomas, would you say that?
I would say no, not in general, but everything new, there are always opportunities trying to do something new. And here we have something that is very, in some senses, very unstructured and very obviously unregulated. It depends on what you're talking about. And I think that in some senses, a big failure, like the biggest failures I see in esports, was how, especially during the pandemic, anybody could set up a tournament and actually not having the tournament, they just took the money and left.
Yeah.
Those kind of things only happens when something is completely new. Those opportunities exist. But when it comes to...
Would you say that about the other scandals that we've seen in terms of players being tapped and cheating going on effectively? Is that also something of a, it's kind of growing pains?
You're asking me again. Yeah, I know. I think that if you compare with traditional sports, I think it's not worse in any kind of way. And I also think that from a technical point of view, it's much easier to find if somebody is cheating or if they are, getting shot on purpose. It's a digital product. We track every pixel. We will find it. It's easier. Yeah. It's hard to tell if a football goalie didn't make his best effort on that shot.
Yeah.
Can I just add to that, though? I mean, I'll completely agree with Thomas. I mean, this is new, so there's a little bit more focus, and when something goes wrong, there's a little bit more publicity, perhaps. But there's an awful lot of very mature sports where, certainly at the lower levels of those of the tiers, there's probably a lot more concern in the operator and bookmaker world than even with esports, I would suspect. And as Thomas has said, our ability to identify that, we run a slightly different content set then, because we don't do the tournaments, we create our own content from end to end. And we look at it from the point of view that, with the people who have taken our product, if they identify anything that's even remotely suspicious, because we employ everybody, we can take that player out and he never plays again, kind of thing, which is a lot more control than they have overall other kind of traditional sports, if you like. I mean, if you told them that I don't want to besmirch any sports, but at lower levels of darts, snooker, tennis, whatever it might be, they have to try and work around suspicions that people have done something, for a backhander. So we managed to take all that out. I think this will be the cleaner element of mainstream content as time goes by, rather than being one that people will concern about. But there's a lack of knowledge, but an improving knowledge from the operators that they're worried about that because they don't know it well enough. But that's getting better with time, and I think that will mean it will be less of an issue going forward, or less of a perception going forward.
Yeah, I think long term that it's harder to match fix or cheat in esports than even traditional sports. Despite the fact that some of the activity is happening in rooms where people are sitting at computers. But as you mentioned, there's just so much data inherent to playing a video game and all the signals produced by that software at that moment that it's actually pretty easy to identify when players are doing anything abnormal or different than their normal approach to playing certain games. But you have to remember that esports is, especially professional esports, is maybe 15 to 20, 25 years old only. And in the last 15 years, where the volume significantly increased of participation in the production of professional leagues and competition formats, for many years, it wasn't something that paid well. Here was a profession almost for a player that still required 40, 50, 60 hours a week of just grinding and learning how to play a game at the highest level, to see audiences that in some cases rival traditional sports. But really, until the last 3 or 4 years, the players weren't equally compensated. So they were part of something that took that much effort, and they were seeing the audience and fandom rival that of sports, but they were getting paid nothing. And if you look back at time at the different moments where there were match fixing scandals or not necessarily proneness to cheat, but susceptibility, you can identify where the players were on it. I'm not excusing it. I'm just saying you can identify there were players that were hoping to make more money for their effort. But in the last 3-4 years, I mean, we have CS:GO pros who are participating in the ESL event here in Malta this week that make millions a year, and it quickly changed the ecosystem and quickly changed definitely any player's willingness to take a tap on the shoulder and do anything stupid like that.
I've got, as you can all see, we've got like 3 minutes left. Just and it was said, you mentioned it on the main stage about future forecasting, having a look at what's going to be the case in 5 years' time, for instance. Do you think in 5 years' time, including your own brands, if you're an operator or any brands you're working with, do you think we're going to have a kind of an esports endemic betting brand that will be a big brand just in betting terms generally? Do you think something like a Luckbox or Rivalry or even maybe Unicorn, put that in a slightly different box, but do you think that could become a big operator in a global sense, largely off the back of, as you say, attracting a specific audience to betting? Thomas, do you think you're going to be there? You're going to be there? Do you think?
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
No, I think so too. I have to think so. I think 5 years. The likely thing is that I think there's going to come products that speak to this new generation, and I think they're also going to talk to the older generation, as I said, and it will be the big existing sports operators who suck those products up and spread them to most people, even though we at Luckbox and Rivalry and Unicorn are really going to try. Of course, Unicorn are going to have a little bit of help from some other brands in their group, but that's what I think is going to happen.
Justin, do you think that Unicorn will be up there with Ladbrokes, Coral, and
Oh, I sure hope so.
MGM?
I think that it's possible, especially when you consider the sheer number of customers that are potentially available to us. One thing worth noting, though, is for any of us to be successful in the way you're describing, our challenge is even more significant than post-PASPA regulated US, where these brands are growing to astronomical size really quickly, because they have an opportunity to go after a lot of bettors who have just been either on track, off track, or doing gambling illegally, and now they're available. There is some number of those known quantity esports bettors available in esports, and we're still trying to attract them from the black market. However, there is an even more significant number of esports fans who are heavy consumers of this this content type, heavily engaging around the games they love, that I think are available to this form of entertainment. They just haven't been properly kind of brought down the funnel. And that's going to take a little bit of an educational approach, something that's illustrative and brings them in comfortably. But it's also a significant opportunity to create more casual brands and not fall into the traps of even some of my sister companies in Entain, where they have to take care of these VIP businesses, which I hope to never have in Unicorn, because that's just not the way I want to run my business.
Okay.
Can I just say, I would agree with that, but I think I've got a slightly different bent on it, in that, you know, esports is too general a term. I think in 5 to 10 years, League of Legends, Dota 2, CSGO will be sports that people will bet on, right? And they will be a part of the overall portfolio that will be used, and they will attract a different customer, and that'll be cross-sold in the same way. So there'll be a little bit of balance between the two. There'll be a specific way. There needs to be more. The focus will be on what you need to do to attract and keep and retain and monetize those customers. But it won't be. I think if it's successful, it won't be that there'll be this generic esports where it's all, you know, multiple titles. I think they're all gonna. The big ones will stand alone, and will be the equivalent of, well, maybe not football in there, but certainly in that top 10 of sports that people are regularly engaging with from a betting perspective.
Okay, that's great. So I'd like to thank my panel. That's Conleth, Justin, Marek, and Thomas. Thank you very much. It's a fantastic, fascinating chat. Thank you.
Yes.